Whether you have a custom set of clubs in the bag or just bought something off the rack, knowing your specs and understanding how they affect your game will ultimately determine how you progress and how your game improves. Today, we're talking about lie angles, the different ways they're determined, and how to decide ultimately what method works best for you. Let's go. Welcome to Cloudy Coast Golf Co. My name's Johnny, and today we're dipping our toes into determining lie angles, discussing a variety of different ways that you can get there, and then ultimately trying to pick what way will work best for me, and hopefully you can figure out what will work best for you. If you find yourself asking what are lie angles and why are they important, there's really two types of lie angles that are important to know when we're talking about golf clubs specifically. The first of them is static lie. All golf clubs are built from the manufacturer with a static lie. Standard is going to differ from club to club and from manufacturer to manufacturer, but essentially all it is the degree between the plane of the sole of the golf club and ultimately the center of the shaft. That angle changes throughout your set of irons to accommodate the changes in length of the clubs. However, variables like height, arm length, and how you swing the club will affect what angle you should ultimately play. The other type of lie is dynamic lie, and this is how the club is actually being delivered to the golf ball. This can be affected by a wide variety of different variables to include club weight, club length, shaft flex, and ultimately how you're swinging or delivering the club on the plane that you are. It's really going to be specific to the individual, and you don't really know how it's going to end up until you actually get to see how that club is delivered to the ball. The problem is there are so many different ways to fit lie angles for the player. And ultimately, what method works best for you is gonna be determined on your swing and on the individual. So today we're working through 5 different methods of determining lie angles to see how they perform and which is ultimately gonna be the best starting place for me in trying to figure out what my specific specs are for my clubs. The first one that we're gonna be starting with today is one that many of us are probably familiar with, just whether you've been shopping at big box stores or you've been using custom club fitters in your area, and that is the ping color-coded chart. This chart uses your overall height and wrist height to determine club length and will give you a recommendation on length and lie relative to standard. An important thing to note here is if you are doing this measurement at home or at your local shop is to make sure that you're wearing your current golf shoes because that will affect the overall height compared to a normal everyday shoe that you might be wearing or barefoot as well. To do this, I grabbed my overall height on the wall here in my garage, and then using a trick that I've seen online in order to grab a measurement for your wrist height as well, using a piece of masking tape and a wall, I collected my information and then went on Ping's website and entered it on the chart, which I'll include in a link down below. So with those adjustments in hand, I'm gonna go ahead and grab the Callaway Apex CB that I'll be doing this test with today, make that adjustment to the 65-degree lie angle, and we'll see how it performs out the gate. The next method that I'm going to be working with is going to be the lie board, which has been around just as long, if not longer, than the color graded chart from Ping. The goal for this is going to be working towards and adjusting the club to get a center strike on the bottom of the club head, which you can see in a variety of those stickers that are created to be used in conjunction with the lie board. For the test today, I'll just be using the club itself with the lie board, which will create a slight mark on the bottom of the club, and I'll be able to make that adjustment as necessary, either toe up or toe down, to try to move that strike towards the center position of the sole of the club head. The idea behind this and the goal with setting the club up in this way is that that center strike on the sole should promote a more straight starting line and ultimately create a better overall orientation of how the club moves through the turf. The reality though might not be the same, so we're gonna make those adjustments as necessary and ultimately document and see how that's gonna compare from the Ping color graded table and ultimately compare that to the data that we're getting off of the GC quad and adjustments that we'll be making later on. Let's see how it does. Definitely looks very upright at address. That toe is certainly up off the ground. Our third option that we're going to be addressing today is going to be the most technologically advanced option that is available to us, and that is going to be using a launch monitor device, and whether that's the Foresight Sports, TrackMan, or whatever is available to you to determine the dynamic lie of the golf club as it is coming through impact. What we're looking to do here is adjust the static lie accordingly until we're able to get a 0.0 degree dynamic lie at impact on the monitor and see if that ultimately gives us the type of ball flight that we're looking for when selecting the lie angle that we should be playing. Let's see how it performs. Made a couple adjustments on this to get it to a flat lie angle coming into impact and ended up at 68.5 degrees of lie. So we're at 6.5 degrees up right now to get to that 0.0. And let's get a few here and see how it performs. Now going from the most technical to the least technical, if you are looking for something that is accessible to you, look no further than the fourth option here, and that is just going to be a line on the golf ball that you're hitting in an effort to ultimately determine how that club is being delivered to the golf ball. All you have to do is take your normal ball alignment guide and mark a line with a Sharpie or a dry erase marker, then line that up facing where the club will ultimately impact the golf ball. Do this as perpendicular to the ground as you possibly can in order to be as accurate as possible with this relatively rudimentary method. Ultimately, you're going to be determining success on how you are performing based on where that line is oriented on the club face itself. A line that is straight up and down on the club head will be indicative of a near 0 degree dynamic lie at impact, while something pointing a little bit more towards the heel will indicate that you need to be more upright, or more towards the toe will indicate that you need that club to be bent a little more flat. Ultimately, this is a great option for you to determine whether you're on the course, on the driving range, or just hitting balls at home and don't have a launch monitor available to you to get this information on how your club is ultimately impacting that golf ball. And you can maybe make some adjustments as needed at your local shop in accordance with what you're seeing on the club face. It is also important to do this across your entire bag because not all lie angles are necessarily going to be created equal, and you may be delivering a golf club a little differently depending on a lot of the different variables like we had talked about, but this is a super easy way to get that done. Number 5 for today, and the last on the list, is bending the golf club to promote the start line that you ultimately are looking to achieve. And to do this, you need access to a loft and line machine. Here, I've got a Mitchell Steel Club machine. And this is actually a method that I had utilized at the beginning of last season when I was coming out of the winter, having not really played a whole lot. To do this, you'll need the ability to make small adjustments with your individual clubs to get the ball going in the direction that you ultimately want it to go. A good way of measuring this is having a baseline of the overall orientation of all of your golf clubs in order to see what direction you're ultimately going to need to bend these clubs one way or another. This method will, however, be different than virtually all the other methods that we have discussed previously, because a lot of those were looking for a 0.0 lie angle or that center strike on the bottom of the club head. For this adjustment, we really are going to have no idea what it is going to be. We're just looking for ball flight alone. And that can unfortunately get us in a couple of situations like I have found myself in, where that dynamic lie maybe gets a little bit too far out and we are now overcompensating for potential swing faults that we just maybe need to address in a lesson and get ourselves moving in a better way in that regard. But with that being said, we're going to make some adjustments, see what is needed to promote that right of line ball flight that I am looking for, and see how that compares ultimately to the variety of different adjustments that we had made so far today. Let's check it out. So let's dive right in and see how things shook out amongst the 4 different adjustments that were made during this test. First off with the ping and starting us out at a 3-degree upright lie and the recommendation of a 1/2 inch long, which I was playing at 3/4 of an inch long. And then ultimately from there was a lot of trial and error that got us to eventually a 6.5 degree of upright lie to get a roughly 0 degree dynamic lie with the GC quad. I'm very much a big picture guy when it comes to trying to break things down initially, so let's take a look at some big pictures. If you were to look at these 4 profiles, which would you say looked the best to you? If you were starting to look at blue, pink, or yellow, I don't think I would ultimately argue with you. I took out a few of the outliers from the blue and pink profile in an effort to kind of fit the more general trend of where the golf ball was going in each of those sets. Now, how about these 4 profiles? What would you say would be your pick amongst the top performers in these groups? For me, I'm inclined to say red and yellow, which if you didn't realize in comparison to the first one, look virtually the same with only 1 golf shot being taken out from the grouping as a whole. So if the goal with this game is to ultimately hit the least number of crappy shots possible, I think looking at the red and the yellow profile and the overall consistency that I was able to achieve in each of those sets is ultimately a step in the right direction in terms of trying to determine what type of lie angle method is ultimately going to be best suited for my game, at least as a starting place. Because one of the biggest things that I noticed throughout this test and the variety of different adjustments that I was ultimately making is that some of the larger adjustments, especially in that more upright lie angle position, I was ultimately changing the way that I was swinging the golf club to try to perform to my best guess of what was needed in order to get that golf ball on the correct starting line. I know that's not the easiest thing to see when watching the video alone. Looking at the variables like face to path, spin axis, and some of the dynamics or strike locations associated with each of these sets, I suppose that it is necessary when doing a test like this to have an understanding of how I'm ultimately going to adapt to the adjustments that are being made, and whether that's necessitating either turning the screen off or moving the data from the screen or something in the future. I'm going to work through that and try to come up with a good plan going forward in order to have as clean of a test looking at these different variables as possible. So with that being said, let's look at each of these methods more closely and see which of them is best suited for me, and hopefully end up at a point where you can decide which of these might work best for you. First up, and probably the easiest to start with, is the ping color-coded chart. Whether you're doing this by yourself at home or with a friend, and you're looking to buy a set of clubs online and get you in a good general ballpark of where you should be from a club specification standpoint, to me, this is probably hands down the best option out there for anybody looking to start. From a performance perspective, the strike was fine, and arguably with how my swing was working today, it performed in the top 2 hands down. Looking at the numbers, the strike and the overall performance in terms of distance dispersion was the best out of any of the ones that we tested. And in general, the quality of golf shot that I was seeing and the consistency from a ball flight standpoint was the best, if not tied for the best, out of any of the ones in the test. Next up on the list, and again, a pretty easy one for all of us at home to have access to, is the lie board. You can pick these up at a variety of different shops online, whether that be Amazon or golf-specific websites out there. There were, however, a couple of issues that I did find when trying to use this tool to make adjustments to the golf clubs during this test. And one of those big things was the lack of accuracy when I was comparing a zeroed strike on the lie board with the numbers coming out of the GC quad. I was seeing about a 2-degree toe down attitude, and whether that was an adjustment that I was making myself or just the reality of the accuracy in using this particular method, it is something to keep in your back pocket. Fortunately for me, it did end up working out, because I do tend to use or find preference with that toe down strike with the golf club when I'm looking at dynamic lie. But it is something to take into account when you are using this, that maybe you need to find that perfect spot, and whether that's more heel biased or toe biased, and where you're going to want to make those adjustments for your specific clubs. Next up is the GC quad and that desired 0.0 dynamic lie angle that we were chasing. And funny enough, in this test, even though I did reach a 0.0 dynamic lie, I wasn't there for very long. And I found that shortly after reaching that dynamic lie, I was making adjustments to my swing, which you can see pretty obviously in terms of how I was following through with the golf ball in order to promote that start line that I'm ultimately going for. And again, like I talked about previously in the video, that might necessitate me changing the way that I do these tests in order to take some of that bias or feedback loop out in order to try to get as quality of data and information from the way that I'm hitting these golf balls as possible, depending on the type of setting that I'm ultimately using for these clubs. That being said, there are definitely some merits out there to having that 0.0 dynamic lie in terms of start line, club face orientation, and then overall controllability through the turf or that turf interaction that you're going to be seeing. So that would definitely be something I might want to play with a little bit further along in the season when I have an opportunity to get outside and hit on some grass instead of the 2 feet of snow that I'm currently working with outside right now. But at the end of the day, for me and my golf game, and when I look into just how the golf ball is coming off and what's most comfortable for me, this really was not it at the end of the day. And that's pretty obvious with the inconsistency, especially when it came to strike position, which I saw probably the worst amongst any of the other portions of this test. But like I said, both this and the lie board would be a good option to eventually take out onto the course or the driving range and test on actual grass one day to see how that interaction actually shakes out, or at the end of the day with some of the equipment changes that I might be making going into this next season, or as I work on my swing getting into the new year here, how that dynamic position actually changes throughout the progression of my golf game. The next option up is the marker method, and though I did not make any adjustments doing this particular method, we saw in the test that it ended up being pretty much zeroed up and down the club face coming off of the testing from the GC quad. And this is one of those great options for you. And again, I did say dry eraser or a permanent marker out there. I would highly recommend the dry erase marker just in terms of being able to get that off the golf ball or the club face relatively easily. But at the end of the day, whether you're hitting a tee shot on the golf course or you're using range balls and you want to get an assessment in terms of how the golf club is ultimately coming through impact, this is a low barrier, super easy option where you can just keep this in your bag. And the vast majority of us out there already have the golf ball alignment tools that are typically used for putting. So you can slap that on there, make sure it's lined up exactly up and down on the hitting mat or hitting area. But just to reiterate the point, a line pointing more towards the heel means your toe down at impact, while one pointing more towards the toe means your toe up at impact. Last up on the list, and arguably one of my favorite options out there, is just adjusting the lie angle on your golf clubs in order to promote a start line that you're looking for when you're out there playing on the course. And even though there are some things to take into account when you are doing this type of adjustment, for the vast majority of us who are looking to just play on the weekends or get the most out of the time that we have to get out on the course and play, making the small adjustments, as long as it's not really impacting turf interaction or the overall efficiency of the strike, could really make some super low barrier improvements to how the golf ball is starting out and then keeping things in play, or at least reducing those overall misses like we saw in this test today. The point being, if you can make some slight adjustments to your golf clubs with the swing that you're already working with and improve consistency and then overall how you're performing out there on the course, why not give it a try and see if it works for you, and you at the end of the day either do or do not compromise on the quality of golf shot or the consistency that you're getting out of that particular setting that you're utilizing with your clubs. For me, I saw good overall consistency for the grouping as a whole, and in comparison to the other 3 that we tested, the only one that actually finished up on the right side of the center line. And just to note some of the things that I was noticing after making that adjustment, I do get a feeling that I'm able to lean into the swing a little bit more because I feel as though that left miss that I'm typically more likely to have was somewhat protected from, and it allowed me to almost swing a little bit harder just as a feeling in comparison to the other adjustments that were being made. So at the end of the day, what option is ultimately going to come out on top when trying to determine the best lie angle method for me and my golf game? For what I was able to see today, the winner, I think, has to be the ping color-coded chart because of how it managed the ball flight and the overall accessibility that it has for all of us at home as a starting place. And really, if I'm being honest, when I was working on designing this test and going through all of these different methods of determining lie angle, I really did not think this was going to be remotely close to being the best option for me. But the consistency that I was able to see out of the way I was striking the golf ball, and at the end of the day, how incredibly easy this was to just get my height, get my wrist height, and then enter this in there and put me in a really good position to hit some good golf shots. I think this is going to be a great option to start this process and trying to get into a proper dynamic lie throughout my whole golf bag, at least as a starting place, and then do some testing, refine a little bit more in order to promote that higher level of consistency and ultimately better performance throughout the entire set of irons that I have in the bag. So with that being said, if you enjoyed this video, thank you so much for watching if you had made it this far. If you find yourself being one of the 96+% of people out there watching these videos that are currently not subscribed, climb on in, work your way down into the comments. Let me know what methods have worked well for you. If you go with a particular strategy in terms of using a certain dynamic lie angle throughout your set of clubs, and whether that's wedges, irons, or maybe just different attitudes in the hybrids or wood categories as well. This is something that I'm looking to refine and develop a process around how I'm setting up my golf bag going into this next season. Additionally, I'm working on a follow-on video to this one, starting that process of addressing my entire bag. So make sure you stay tuned for more coming up on this particular topic, and would love to hear your opinions out there. So make sure to click that subscribe button down below and follow along for videos to come. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.